My name is Gene. I'm an alcoholic. Already I haven't even lied yet. It's not testing. Thank you very much.
Test. Now, I want you to know this is not my system, all right? I'm over here on this other mic, and they could fix this if they wanted to.
Can you, yeah, okay. My name is Gene. I'm an alcoholic. And I was hoping that maybe he was the only one that the mic was going to work for and we'd let him talk. What a neat word that hope is. And I'm one of the speakers, I guess, that cries in the beginning more than at the end. I don't know why. It's hard for me to imagine that there's so many people sitting out here listening to what I got to say. Anyway, I feel like I'm having my first anxiety attack on a merry-go-round at the United Nations building. And it's a good feeling. Oh, me. My fondest memory of my mom. Did I lose it again? Okay. My fondest memory of my mom. My fondest memory of my dad. And Mom. I was very sick from the disease of alcoholism before I ever took a drink of alcohol. And the reason I know that's true is because I was raised by an alcoholic. And I can relate to so many things that Barbara was talking about today, and I thought it was so neat the way she showed her working of the program through her teenage daughter's problems, and it was just a powerful message for me. And of course, if you missed Ann P. last night, there's no way I could compare to that message. Any woman that will give orders to a boa constrictor can have anything she wants in my book. And she reminded me of my first wife just a little bit. Anyway, my fondest memory. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and my mom said to me one day, I had gotten some money from somebody, from somewhere. My mother was in the active phase of her alcoholism, and she asked me if she could borrow some of this money, and I said yeah, and then when it was time for me to go to the store and buy some candy, I asked her if I could have some of the money back, and she got very defensive and she got very angry with me, and she told me she was going to go kill herself. And she got in the car, she ran outside, and my dad was overseas, and we had about 4 kids in my family, and she ran out the front door and got in the car and said she was going to drive off and kill herself. And she drove off. And that made a very profound impression on me. And I hated her. I despised her. But she came back in about a half an hour, and I didn't ask her for nothing else. When she wanted to take something, I didn't say nothing. And every now and then I'd forget, and she'd play that game with me again. But see, I'd learned. The disease of alcoholism I didn't know anything about, but I knew an awful lot about what I needed to do in order to survive. You know, people can take those kind of problems with self-esteem and they can do one or two things with them, I think. And by the way, everything I share with you is my own opinion, and knowing my track record, you might have to weigh that a little bit before you decide whether I'm right or wrong, but it is all my opinion. But I think when we have self-esteem problems, a lot of us take those self-esteem problems and we say we're no good, and we become very inhibited and very introverted. And then there's some of us that take those same self-esteem problems and they turn it into an air of arrogance and defiance. And my air was an air of arrogance and defiance. And I decided that the only way I was going to be able to survive in this world was to be able to manipulate my environment. And I started that very, very early on. And of course, most children who are raised by alcoholics have tremendous relationship problems because there's so many walls that are up. And we got to tear walls down and we peek around behind them and we want to know we're not risking nothing. And if you've never had a chance to attend one of those adult children of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, I strongly urge you to do it. The feelings are so powerful that you can cut them with a knife. And when you attend those meetings, I'm overwhelmed when I walk into the room. It's so neat, this fellowship we've got that means survival for us. But anyway, early on I had this tremendous feeling because of these self-esteem problems that I didn't quite measure up. And I thought everybody else knew what was going on and was fitting in but me. And so consequently I became what they call an overachiever. I would try so hard to measure up that I would do better than most people at most things. When I was a young man and I was playing athletics, I made all the all-star teams. I was a super athlete when I was young. And the reason for that is because I was always trying to achieve, to prove I was okay. And my peers would tell me how great I was doing. And the more they would tell me how great I was doing, the more inadequate I would feel. And so the more inadequate I felt, the more I would try to achieve. And it was a paradox. It was crazy. When I was in high school, in our high school Hall of Fame, I was voted the most talented student in my high school Hall of Fame. And that should have been something I should have been able to tuck away and say, hey, that's all right. But I felt guilty as hell about that. So undeserving. But that was a motivating factor for me to try harder to do more things. And that was before I did any drinking of substance. I wasn't a teenage alcoholic, the kind that kept their booze in their locker. I know there's a lot of those today, but I wasn't one of those. But I was a very young manipulator of other people, and I was going to manipulate my environment and my circumstances so that I could survive. And I knew that the only way I'd be able to survive would be if I could manipulate people, places, and things so that I didn't feel strange. And so I set out on a course of trying to do that, and it's a very difficult task to manipulate the world you live in. The world is a big place. But I used to make ridiculous decisions. You know, I had this tremendous void, this tremendous feeling of emptiness in the pit of my stomach. And I tried to fill that. And I figured that if I would arrange this or arrange that or do this or that, I'd feel okay. And the problem was I'd always feel okay for about 2 or 3 months. And then that would pass, and I'd have to try to find something else to manipulate. Something else to try to make me feel okay. So I made a lot of really, really crazy decisions because I felt inadequate, and I'll go into those just for a little bit. One of the things, I graduated from high school when I was 17 years old, and I decided that my problem must be I'm not a man. I don't feel like I'm a man, so I joined the Marines. I felt inadequate, so I joined the Marines. That's got to be the most ridiculous thing anyone can ever do. And when I got away to Parris Island, South Carolina, I discovered the reason that I joined the Marines is I wanted to be special. I wanted to be special. But I got out of Parris Island and I was achieving then too. You know, I was a platoon guide and a dress blues and all this other jazz. And the more accolades I got, the more guilty I felt. You know, and so there that void was back again. Now I hadn't done much drinking up to this point. I did a little drinking in high school just to be like my peers. You know, I went out and had a few cold beers, but I hadn't done much drinking. I came home. My father had some very firm rules about drinking in my house. I was raised, once again, my dad was in the military. And I came home drunk one time, and the next morning my dad had my bags packed at the front door. He said, hit it. So I hit it, and I called back that day. I said, where am I going to go? And so I came back. I didn't come home drunk anymore. But when I got back from Parris Island, I decided that inadequacy, that emptiness was back again. So I made another one of those profound decisions. I said, what my problem must be is I need a wife. I need a woman in my life, somebody that I can love and someone who can make me feel like I'm okay. You can imagine what I was taking into the relationship. Here I was feeling inadequate, so I decided to get married. There's a whole bunch of people out there looking for people like me, too, by the way. Okay? There's certain things you can't talk about when you're up here. I've discovered that. Every time I talk about women, this thing cuts off. And I'm sure there's a message in that. But the hell with it. I'm going to keep talking about it. So don't. Anyway, I decided to get married, and I found this woman, and she was my high school sweetheart, and we got married, and that was good for about 3 months, too. And after about 3 months, I was feeling inadequate again. So I had gotten transferred to Norfolk. I was, once again, I was still in the Marines. I got transferred to Norfolk, And I had a great job. I was driving for a Navy admiral. I mean, it was a great job. I had a big fancy black staff car with flags and stars on it and the whole deal. And I ran around in dress blues all the time. It was a super, super job. And that was good for about 3 or 4 months. And then that feeling of inadequacy came back again. You know, I was one of these people that whenever that feeling came back, I was going to manipulate my environment. I was going to try to manipulate the circumstances of my life. And the war in Vietnam got going real good. I mean, real good. And I said, I know what my problem is. Here I am, a train killer, and the war's going, and I'm over here driving for some stuffy admiral. And I went to the admiral, I said, you know, Admiral, I said, you know, I think I want to get over there and sink my teeth into that war. And the admiral said, no problem. And about 30 days later, I was in Vietnam. But you know, I discovered something. I'd always been, I remember I told you I was in the most talented in the high school thing. That's because I was real active in drama and speech and stuff like that. But when I got over in Vietnam, that was a 13-month tour. And I was a sergeant. I was a platoon sergeant of an infantry platoon. And people were dying, and were really dying. And people were getting hurt, and I was scared to death. I was absolutely terrified. But you know, when you're in a combat situation in the Marine Corps anyway, you can't just quit. You can't say, fellas, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to head back. The only way they wanted you back was if you were badly wounded or if you were dead. And neither of those two alternatives really appealed to me too much. So I decided that I would start losing my hearing and that I would go deaf, completely deaf. Whatever it took to get the hell out of there, I was going to go. So I was out on an ambush one night, and it was a real scary ambush, and I decided I would go deaf on the way in that next morning. And I knew that they would be able to catch me, so I had to have a gimmick. And my gimmick was going to be I would fall down and claim that I was dizzy and deaf. So if you're dizzy and deaf, you know, they can't send you back. I wanted to get out. And so on the way in that night, I fell down, and the corpsman came running over to me, and he said, what's the matter? And no shots had been fired, you know, and I looked up at him, you know, the way deaf people look up at you, and I said, I don't know. And so he put me on a helicopter and flew me out to a hospital ship called the Repose, and they sent me home. And when I got home, I felt so guilty. You know, you've heard of that post-Vietnam syndrome thing that they got now? Well, I had been there for a few months, but a lot of people that I had been associated with and were in my platoon, in my outfit, got killed, and I felt so guilty because I had actually failed. It was the first time, you know, everyone was telling me how good I was doing most of my life in spite of how I felt. But this was the first time in my life that I actually failed at something, and it was devastating to me. And I couldn't handle it. It wiped me out. And I didn't know what to do. But it was at that time that I started drinking a whole lot. And I discovered something. You know that emptiness, that feeling of inadequacy, and that feeling of not measuring up that goes on that Ann talked about last night? For the first time in my life, when I drank enough of that cold draft beer, I felt like I measured up. The first time, can you imagine how important beer was to me at that time? It was the first time I'd ever felt like I measured up. And of course, that meant I had to stay out and drink a lot, because as soon as I'd stop drinking, I'd feel like I couldn't measure up again. So I wasn't going home, and so my wife and I got divorced. And it was at that time I learned a little bit about anxiety. When my wife and I got divorced, I started living at the barracks where I was stationed, and I started having what they call anxiety attacks, and maybe you'll be able to relate to some of these things. I was in a bar called Tun's Tavern, and I was shooting pool with a friend of mine, and all of a sudden, you know, my wife and I were kaput, and I was drinking all the time, non-stop. And as I was shooting pool, or as my buddy was shooting pool, this tremendous fear came over me. You know, I had a tremendous feeling that I was dying. You know, my heart started beating real fast, like it was going to jump out of my chest, and my palms got sweaty. And I tried to take a relaxing breath, you know, that sighing breath, and I couldn't take it, and it scared me to death, and I thought I was dying. And I told my buddy, I said, you got to help me, I'm dying. And he looked at me and the words were, what's your shot? I said, no, I'm serious, I'm dying. And we got in his car and we ran off in his car to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. And we ran in the emergency entrance of the hospital and I ran inside there and I said, you got to help me, I'm dying, I can't breathe. And the corpsman that was there, he said, well, you know, he's looking for blood or something. There was nothing. And he said, well, you know, have a seat over there, we'll be right with you. I said, no, I said, I can't breathe. I said, this is serious. He said, well, how long have you not been able to breathe? I said, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes. Never dawned on me how ridiculous that sounded, you know. He said, well, if you haven't been breathing 20, 30 minutes, we better treat you right away. And so they started treating me right away, and they said something to me at that time that was frightening to me. They said, well, Sergeant, we don't find any evidence of anything wrong with you physically. And they put an extra accent on that, physically. And I said, well, I appreciate that. Matter of fact, I feel better. I do feel better. I said, I'm going to go ahead and head back. Appreciate that, though. And I left. And that night, I came back in my car because I was waiting for that tremendous fear to come back. And I slept in my car behind that hospital waiting to die. And for the next 4 months of my life, I went to that hospital and sat in my car behind it and waited to die. And the only reason that that's even important is because I didn't go there except when the bar closed. You see, the bar would close and I would go behind the hospital and sit in my car and wait to die or withdraw. I didn't know what was going on with me. Hell, I was 20 years old. Sergeant in the Marine Corps. I didn't think anything was wrong with me. All-star athlete, most talented. I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. Certainly nothing like alcoholism. I didn't think alcohol. As a matter of fact, alcohol was the only thing that made me feel like I was adequate. Alcohol was the only thing that made me feel like I measured up. So I certainly wasn't going to blame that for anything. But I had all these other things that I could blame, and I was very, very famous for blaming things and circumstances. Pretty soon, one of the corpsmen came out to the window of the car, and he knocked on it, and he said, look, we got a special section up here where we put people who die a lot. He said, we'd like you to come up there and visit with us for a while. So I went up there to that special ward, and they were right. There was a special section. And after I was up there for about 3 months, they said, look, you want a discharge or what? We think that once you're away from the regimentation of the military, this will go away. I said, well, I want to quit sleeping behind this hospital waiting to die. You tell me what I got to do. So I took a discharge. And I was Catholic, you know, and I am Catholic. And when you're Catholic, a lot of hard rules that go on being Catholic. It's tough being Catholic. It's tough being a bad Catholic. But I was Catholic, so I went to this woman now that I was well, and I got me a job, and I'm back achieving again. Got me a job selling insurance. I think I sold more insurance the first 3 months than anybody in the history of the whole damn company. So I went back to this woman I was divorced from, and I said, hey, now that I'm well, I said, why don't we give this thing another shot? She said, I ain't shacking up. This was in 1968. Everybody was shacking up with somebody in 1968. Some people were shacking up with 2 or 3 people in 1968. But she wasn't, being a girl of good, high moral fiber. So I said, well, you know, I was Catholic. Hell, I didn't think we were divorced anyway. Catholics don't recognize divorce. See, the Catholics and the government authorities, they operate on 2 different levels. So I said, well, whatever. She said, we're going to have to get married again, so we got married again. And she got pregnant. And my sales for insurance were doing real well, but I started doing a little drinking. And about 5 months into the pregnancy, I was sleeping behind Norfolk General Hospital in my car waiting to die. And they have a special floor where they put people who die a lot too. And I went up there and spent a month in their special floor. And I got out of there just as screwed up as I was when I was in there. And I remembered that if I drank enough of this cold draft beer, that feeling, it finally took me about that year to realize that if I just kept drinking, the feeling of dying would never come. So I just kept drinking all the time. Well, that meant I was never home again. And it wasn't long before I think I went somewhere and didn't come back. And I just disappeared for a year and a half, and my wife and I got divorced again, and I was down at Virginia Beach running up and down the beach. Matter of fact, this reminds me so much of my home. I was just running up and down the boardwalk, chasing women and waiting on tables, and we were having a great time. I was 23, And I was drinking all the time. See, as long as I kept drinking, I didn't feel like I was dying. So I kept drinking. See, I'd been in 2 psychiatric hospitals, or 3 by this time, and no one had been able to figure this situation out. As a matter of fact, the 3rd one I'd been in was a hospital that wasn't even a psychiatric hospital. They made a special experimental section just for me, I think. And the doctor said, well, we don't think we can solve your problem. I think we're going to have to send you to Eastern State Hospital. And I said, well, look, I said, I'm going to go ahead and get back to you. I said, and I left, and that's when I went down to Virginia Beach, and I never got back to him. But anyway, the winter came, you know, just like it does around here in resort cities. When winter comes, everything closes down. And this was my 2nd winter there. And I said, well, I got to get a regular job. So I got me a job driving a beer truck. Somebody told me beer truck drivers made a lot of money. So I did. I made a lot of money. And I was so good at my job that they promoted me to district manager. And that meant that I rode around and I bought people beer. That's all. I just rode around and bought people beer and, you know, tried to get them to switch to my product. I had all of the draft accounts, and, you know, it was a fantastic job. And they gave me this big expense account. I wore a coat and tie, and I had a fancy car, and it was really neat. I went back to this woman that I was divorced from the 2nd time, and I said, look, once again, I was Catholic. You can be Catholic and be divorced, by the way. You can be Catholic and be divorced. I found that out after years and years. You can be divorced and be Catholic. You just can't ever have sex again. Well, that's not true either. You can have sex again, but you better have it in a confessional booth. Because if you die, you're going to hell. It's that damn simple. There's no negotiation. The Catholic Church has got some very strict rules, and there's no negotiation for a lot of their rules. If you touch certain parts of your body, you'll go to hell for that too. Well, I was doing all of it. I was going to hell quick, I can tell you that. So I went back to this woman. I said, let's try this thing again, or else I'll never have sex. No, I didn't tell her that. She was sick. Ooh. Maybe I should just pass. We'll call some of you up here and you can tell us about your... Anyway, she took me back. Whatever the hell she was, that wasn't standard, but we got married. She said, I'm not shacking up. I said, oh, God, here we go. So we got married again, and, you know, the 3rd time they give you a card, and you just punch it, and, you know. No, that's not true. But anyway, she got pregnant. You know, it's my belief that if you got alcoholism and you don't treat your alcoholism, that you will get other isms. I don't know any pure alcoholics. You know, I don't know. I've heard somebody say that, well, we want our meeting to be pure alcoholics. Now, what the hell is that? I never heard of such a ridiculous thing. There's no pure alcoholics. The ones that aren't alcoholics and smoking dope and taking pills are doing something. I know that I was. It took me a long time to come to the realization. I know that if you don't treat alcoholism and you got it, you're going to get other isms. And I was getting a whole bunch of other isms. You know, somewhere along the line, I had picked up this perverted idea about being a peeping Tom. That's what... It's very difficult to have a chairman with a see-through blouse. But somewhere along the line, I had triggered into that compulsion, and it became... I never had any peeping Tom experiences when I was a little kid. When I was 4 years old, I didn't see some uncle or aunt of mine undressing, and it made me kinky. I was hoping the psychiatrist would say, well, we'll take that out. Now you're all better. But that didn't happen. The problem was I was drunk all the time, and that made me vulnerable to all kinds of other things. And I triggered into this. I came upon a circumstance where where the opportunity to be a voyeur, if you will, happened. And I was so depressed at the time that I experienced a high from that situation that I never was supposed to experience. And when you experience that high that you're never supposed to experience, anything less than that is hard to be satisfied with. And some of you may not understand that, and some of you may. But it was a vicious, vicious cycle, because now I had another thing to add to my repertoire of perversions. Now I was drinking all the time to take care of my feeling of inadequacy, and I was also peeping through people's windows. And my wife was 5 months pregnant with our second child now, and we weren't sleeping together or anything else, and you know what goes on in an alcoholic household. And so my sex life, that's what it was. And I was ashamed. I was so ashamed. You know, I was so very ashamed. One day I was in a bar and I quit my job. I told the guy, I called him up, I said, look, you want me back for this goofy meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? And I said, I can't make it. The reason, I was drunk. I couldn't even drive. I didn't tell him that. You can't call in drunk. They don't respect that as an option. I said, I can't make it. I'm busy. He said, well, you got to make it. It's your meeting. You got everybody here waiting for you. I said, well, you're going to have to send them all home. And he laid some guilt on me. This was the owner of the company. I said, come get your car and the hell with it. I'd had the job about 4 years. I said, just come get your car and the heck with it. And they did, and I walked home drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning in the rain. And I told my wife, I said, I quit the job. I don't need their aggravation. And she said, oh, my God. And she fell down crying and said, this is crazy. She couldn't go back to any other relatives because when she married me the first time, half of them disowned her. By now, all of them had disowned her. So she had nowhere to turn. I had her trapped. I had her trapped and I had me trapped. Not only was I a drinking, peeping maniac, I had acquired all the other paranoias that come with alcoholism. You see, I couldn't travel on bridges or through tunnels. And I couldn't fly. I was terrified to do anything that was going to confine me in any way whatsoever, in any manner where I didn't have control. And if you're in a tunnel or on a bridge, you can't stop right away and do what you want to do. Elevators, forget it. I couldn't go on elevators either. I'd acquired all these paranoias, so I was virtually trapped. And when I quit this job, my wife was all upset, and I said, don't worry, I'll get another job. And I answered an ad in the paper. There was a sales manager's job for the state of Virginia, and I got it with the Mogan David Wine Company. And my job was to go out and buy all the people wine in the whole state of Virginia. Now, I was in charge of their merchandising and their marketing. The problem was I couldn't travel because I couldn't function in any of these circumstances. And pretty soon after I had the job, about 2 months, the fellow flew in from Chicago and he said, I got to let you go. He said, I don't understand what's going on. He said, I got to let you go. And I didn't understand what was going on either. But it was the greatest thing that happened to me, I think. One of the greatest things, anyway. And he fired me, and I went home, and I was crying. I was so screwed up and so confused. And I told my wife, I said, I need help. You see, I didn't think the alcohol was that big a problem. I thought the alcohol was truly a solution. But now I was a pervert. And that's what I wanted help with. You see, I didn't want to be a pervert. And so I checked into another psychiatric hospital. This was about my 5th psychiatric hospital. And when I checked in, I had a bottle of moonshine I had stolen from somewhere. And I checked in, and they had a alcoholic section down below, and they had a nut section upstairs. And they put me up there with the nut, understandably so, because I was crazy as I could be. And while I was in there, my group had 13 people in it. You know, psychiatrists nowadays, they got these modern hospitals. You got ice cream and ping pong, and I mean, it's like a hotel. It's really, really nice, and this was one of the nicest ones there. And they put 13 or 14 of you in a group per psychiatrist. Now, the theory behind that is that $75 a shot at times 13 people is $1,000 a day for somebody. And I haven't quite figured out how that works yet. But anyway, while I'm in this group, see, I want to share all my secrets. I want to get well. I'm scared. Things are getting worse. So it's one of those deals where the patients run the hospital like a community, see. It's a community kind of an attitude. And I'm sitting there, and the psychiatrist says to me and to the group, he says, we have a new member of the community with us today. He says, Gene, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? And I said, yes, I would. I said, matter of fact, I said, I'm a peeping Tom. I said, and I want to get well. And my group had 11 women and 1 man in it. And this is one of them co-educational operations where they ain't got no locks on nothing. Everybody's running around sharing the same johns, and these women go, oh my God, it's just what we need is a damn peeping Tom running around here, And of course, the psychiatrists, if you've ever been to a psychiatrist, they use the patients to bounce off other patients. And little Mary Lou goes, my God, and the doctor says, Mary Lou, that seems to bring out some feelings in you. Would you like to expound on those some? And I said, hold it here. The hell with Mary Lou, I'm the peeping Tom. Anyway, I left out of there after about 30 days. I was the kind of person that I was the last one to know how sick I was. I didn't know how... I was going to be the coolest guy in the mental institution all the time. Whatever mental institution I was going to be in, I was going to be the coolest guy there. My fondest recollection is being in the quiet room of a mental institution. If you've ever been in one, you'll know what I'm talking about. On the door, they got a little parapet that the orderlies can look through to check you out, and see how you're doing. And my memory is I'm standing inside on my toes looking out, and I'm thinking to myself, hello? Going on with me, but that was my Anyway, my roommate, I'll tell you about my roommate Curtis. I think you'll enjoy this. Curtis was a black fella. He was my roommate. He was a bona fide manic depressive. Now, I think all of us are manic depressives to a certain degree, but Curtis was a card carrying manic depressive. I mean, when Curtis was manic, he thought he was Robert Redford, really. And when he was depressed, he wanted to kill himself. And there was no middle of the line. That's the way Curtis was, and that's why he was in there. And while I'm in there, Curtis was about 6'4" and weighed about 110 pounds. And this was in 1975, and afros were in. Curtis had an afro like this, man. He looked like a mushroom walking down the hall. But he loved me without question, and I loved him too. We could relate, you know what I mean? We understood each other. And there was something there, because I was a part-time manic depressive, and he was a full-timer, and I think we understood that about each other. And anyway, my chart in that hospital read the same as it read every hospital I was in, I'm sure, but I know it read in this one, the first day I checked in, patient extremely nervous, I walked the floor all night long, sweating profusely, wouldn't talk to anybody, wouldn't eat. The second day, patient extremely nervous, pacing the floor, didn't sleep, didn't eat, very, very irritable. Third day, patient slept a little bit, but wouldn't participate in group therapy sessions and ate a little bit. And of course, the fourth day, patient wouldn't get out of bed, ate everything in the refrigerator, taking over group therapy sessions, won't let other patients share. Well, we know what happened, right? The psychiatrist didn't know what the hell happened. He said I was getting well. When you get well in this particular psychiatric hospital, they give you what they call status privileges. Now, that means that you can leave the hospital and come back at a certain time. You can come back at 9 o'clock at night. Well, I was doing so well, they decided to let me go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and take Curtis with me. So me and Curtis, we leave the hospital and we're walking out, and Curtis hadn't been out in a long time, and we're walking down this affluent section of Virginia Beach, and we look like Mutt and Jeff, and as we get into this bar where I took him, I walk in and I say, give me 5 drafts, please, and the girl walks over, and Curtis leans over this blonde-haired, blue-eyed sweetheart, and he says, hey, what's happening, Mama? And of course, all the construction workers are in there trying to decide who's going to kill us. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, we walk out because they kick us out, and I can't even walk, and Curtis, he's been rejected by everybody in the hospital, and he wants to kill himself. And we go walking back. And my chart reads the 6-day relapse. Patient came in last night late, broke the ping pong table, told everybody in the hospital to kiss his ass. That's the nature of the illness. Took me 6 more days to get status again. We know why, right? I went through that routine for 30 days. Then my insurance ran out. They said, see you later. But a miracle happened while I was in there. I was in that group. And while I was in there, there was a little old bald-headed guy who was the other man in my group. And he was watching me through this 30 days. And he asked me finally, he said, how much do you drink? And I said, well, what's that got to do with anything? He said, I'm in AA, but I haven't been in about a year, and I'm in here for depression now. He said, but we got a lot of people flaky like you in AA. And I said, I might be a lot of things, but I ain't no damn alcoholic. I was angry at that accusation. I left the hospital, and my wife, of the third trip around, she had finally decided that this was the end of it, and she did leave and has not come back. I've got me a beautiful new green-eyed angel now, Diane, who AA gave to me. I'm very grateful for that. But there was a laundromat in Virginia Beach where all the winos and the bums used to hang out, and I decided I didn't want to hurt anybody else because, see, I was still peeping and drinking and doing all these other things. And it was getting worse. And I couldn't work now because it interfered with all them weird things. And without working, I had no money, so I had to steal what I was drinking. So I'd go out and I'd set out stealing all this stuff, and I'd bring it back to this laundromat where the other winos would hang out. And I'd pass it around to them, and I'd try to get them to like me. Because I wanted so bad for somebody to like me. And it was a lonely feeling. You see, I'd been in 5 mental institutions, and I'd been with the best psychiatrists going, and none of them could do anything for me. And I'd been Catholic as I could be, as Catholic as you can get. And God didn't seem to be able to help me. And I was getting worse and worse with my behavior. My behavior was getting more and more aggressive. And I felt hopeless. I was hopeless. I was doomed. But this laundromat, nobody was laying guilt. You just kind of showed up there, and as long as you didn't bring the law down, they'd let you hang around with them. Because, see, it was on 17th Street of Virginia Beach, and it was getting cold. I went down there in June, and everything was okay till about November, and it started getting cold. And when it got cold, you know, you had to be sure that what you were doing was not going to bring the law down because they'd kick you out. It was an all-night deal. And I'd bring the wine around and try to get them to like me, and we'd pass it around, and they liked me. There was a difference between winos and alcoholic winos, by the way. Everybody at the laundromat was there by choice. No one had been sentenced to the laundromat. Everybody had decided that this is the place where I will cause the least damage, or I'll have to assume the least responsibility. And that's why I was there. I caused the least damage and hurt the least people. Christmas Day in 1975, I was tipping a bottle of Mad Dog wine up. I used to steal Mad Dog because it's got flat bottles. And I could put 3 or 4 of them in my trousers, or somebody's trousers, whoever the hells I had on at that time. That's another story I can go into sometime. But Christmas Day, I was getting sick, which you do a lot. If you've ever done any morning drinking, you get sick a lot of times when you first try to drink. And whatever morning happens to be for you when you live in a laundromat, I was getting sick. And when I was throwing up, more was coming up than I had been putting down, and I thought I was dying. I knew I was dying. I thought that I was physically dying. And of course, the lining of my stomach and my throat and all of these things, liver bile and all of that was coming up. That's the nature of the physiological nature of the disease we got. And it was coming up, and I got scared. Now, you know, I had a lot of good reasons to get well. I had a lot of good reasons. I had a beautiful wife who loved me dearly. God knows. I had a daughter who was, she worshiped me. Isn't that terrible the way that is? The worse we are, the more they love us. And I had a son that hadn't even been born yet, or had just been born. I'd never seen him. So I had a lot of reasons to get sober, but it was only when I was physically dying that I reached out for help. That's self-centeredness of our disease. I was physically dying, and I said, I reach out for help. There was no one else to blame. I couldn't blame my alcoholic mother, the Catholic Church, Vietnam, or the Marines. I couldn't blame my ex-wife. I couldn't blame my kids. I couldn't blame anybody because I didn't have any of these things. I couldn't blame the boss. I couldn't blame anything. I could not manipulate anybody else to lay blame on because there was nothing left. And I was dying. And I called AA because that little old bald-headed man had planted that seed. But see, when he planted that seed, he didn't just say, hey, you drink too damn much. You ain't no good. You ought to go to AA. He said, hey, I drank too much. And I went to AA. And maybe you drink too much. I don't know. And that left a profound impression on me because that's the way AA works. And I called AA up that Christmas Day in 1975. And when I did, the guy that answered the phone, he said, Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, I think I drink a little too much wine, maybe. He said, well, how much do you drink? I said, well, I drink maybe half a bottle a day I'm up to. I was up to about 9 bottles a day. Whatever I didn't want to say, well, whatever I can steal, it, varies. Matter of fact, I'll tell you, well, no, I won't tell you that. Anyway, he said, you're my Christmas present. I said, you must be having a rough Christmas, pal. You see, I hadn't bathed lately at the laundromat. They don't hose you down or nothing, man. You're just kind of there. And in the early months when it's still warm, you can go over to the hotel. They got showers outside, and you can kind of take your shirt off without being too inconspicuous and kind of lather down a little bit if you can. But in December, it's hard to, inconspicuously take your clothes off and start lathering down. So I hadn't bathed, and I was, right rough smelling unit, and he told me I was his Christmas present. He said, I'm going to send somebody out to see you, and I said, well, I appreciate that. I had asked a buddy of mine if I could use his apartment. He said I could. So he said I could use it if I didn't sit on the furniture. And I was sitting over in the corner of his apartment. Now, by this time, I've been on this wine drunk for about 5 months. And by this time, I haven't had a drink for about a half an hour. You can imagine what's going on inside my head. I'm hearing whistles, kids crying, trains, I'm seeing things. I'm jerking around like this, and I know I'm jerking. You know how we get so into self that we can hear our heart beating? And then voices, and I was going crazy. It's a half an hour, man, and it seemed like an eternity, and all of a sudden, this door gets knocked on, and it was a big steel door, and when an alcoholic decides to get help, they're going to go ahead and go for it. I get all I can get now. I mean, if I'm going to surrender, what the hell? So I said, come in. And the guy opens the door, and I want you to picture this. This is what I saw. This guy is 6'8". He weighs about 290 pounds. He's got a pair of bib overalls on, and he's carrying a banjo. And I look, and I'm foggy, and I'm going, oh my God. And the guy walks in, and he looks around, and he spots me in the corner, and he says, well, damn, Bubba, I bet nobody's told you that they love you lately, have they? And of course, I'm going, story of my life, man. Here I am, a divorced, cowardly Catholic pervert. Finally, I called AA. They send me out this 6'8", 290-pound banjo-toting homosexual. I said, man, go ahead, take your best shot. I'm too weak to do anything. And he said, hello, 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 hello. And he said something then that probably is the most important thing I'll say today, whatever. He said, no, Bubba, I love you like you are right now. He said, you'll be a damn sight tougher to love once you get cleaned up. Isn't that true? I don't know how long it takes y'all to get cool. As soon as I found out death wasn't imminent, I got cool again. He threw me in the back of his pickup truck, and we went off to an AA meeting. And I walk in the AA meeting, and I always try to spot me a redhead, and I spotted me one here. We went off to this AA meeting, and I walk in the front door, and there's the most beautiful redheaded woman I ever saw in my life in this AA meeting. Now, I had not bathed lately, but here I start getting myself squared away, you know. I'm scraping the damn lima beans off my shirt here, and I walk on over, and I say, "Hey, what's happening?" She went, "Whoo." And off she went. And off she went. She said, "Keep coming back." And in my sick brain, I said, "Wait till she finds out I'm an ex-Marine. She'll come around." I kept coming back. I came back for about 2.5 months. I came to a meeting every day. I was caught up in it, man. You know how good it feels just to not throw up or to go to court every day. There's a lot of neat feelings that go with that, and they call it a pink cloud. Call it what you want to call it. Just not having that feeling of tremendous terror at all times every day is a pink cloud. But I came to AA every day, 2-3 times a day, just however many meetings I could get into. But no one was stroking me, you know. I wanted somebody to tell me how cool I was doing. And no one was stroking me. They just said, "Keep coming around, Gene, keep coming around." I had a job washing dishes at this time. It was about the best shot I could make. And pretty soon a guy offered me a big fancy job in Richmond. And I took it. And I said, "Well, I'll make 2 meetings tomorrow. Well, I'll make 3 meetings the day after tomorrow. Well, I'll go hang out at the hospital or the drying out center 1 full day. That'll count for 9 meetings or whatever." And after about 2 weeks of that, I got drunk. And I came back again after about a 7-day drunk in another hospital, this one for drying out. I came back again, and when I came back again, I started carrying drunks to meetings. They said, "Strap on a drunk if you're having problems with sex." I had tremendous sex problems. You see, I was still running around peeping through people's windows. I was going to AA meetings, leaving the meeting, going out peeping. It's tough being spiritual in 2 different areas. That'll devastate you. I don't know about y'all. I get slow quick. I get quick, well, whatever the hell it is. I don't get well quick. Anyway, I was trying to do it right, and I couldn't quit doing this other compulsion. And finally I decided I couldn't handle the guilt. So I quit going to meetings again, and I got drunk again. And I came back, and my sponsor greeted me, and he gave me a pencil. He said, "Start writing something." He said, "You're probably going to die if you don't write." And so I started working the 12 steps, and I started writing down all my secrets. And I looked in front of me in black and white at what I was. And it was terrible. I looked at how devastating this illness of alcoholism really was. And it scared me to death. I wrote it all down. And I went away to a retreat about 3 months later. And when I went to this retreat, I had a chance to take my 5th step. And I had a Catholic priest that I took it with. And I told him about all of it. The only thing I didn't tell him was that I was still doing the peeping. I couldn't give it up. I couldn't stop doing it. I couldn't stop doing it. It had me. I wasn't drinking, but I was still running around practicing my sexual compulsion, and I couldn't let go of it. And I was praying for God to take it away. While I was at this retreat, a few months after that, I was at a retreat, and I asked, because I was now getting a little bit of sobriety, and I wanted to get well, but I couldn't stop doing this sexual thing. And I said, "God, please take this thing away." And I like to draw an analogy of a hot iron, a hot branding iron. And I was holding on to this hot branding iron. It was called my sexual compulsion, or my character defect that I couldn't let go of. And I said, "God, please take away this sexual compulsion. I don't want to do it anymore." And I couldn't. And I'd go out that night, and I'd practice it again after the spiritual AA meeting. And I'd say, "God, can't you take away this sexual compulsion? Please take it away." And I'd go out and practice it again, and the branding iron would get hotter. And I'd say, "God, what's wrong with me? Why am I different? Why are all these other people getting well and getting spiritual and I can't?" And I was scared. And I said, "Please take this away from me." And the night I came home from a retreat, the night I got home from the retreat, I committed my worst sin, or crime, if you will. And I realized at that time that I was powerless over that sexual compulsion. and the branding iron got so hot that I let go of it. And when I let go of it, God took it and he set it over there. And he said, I'm going to leave it over there in case you ever want it back. And since that time, I haven't had to practice that sexual compulsion. That was 9 years ago that I haven't had a drink. But it took a little longer to give up the sexual compulsion. I progressed very slowly. But I realized that that's the way God answers my prayers. If I can't give something up and I want to get rid of it and I keep praying, God will allow that branding iron to get hotter. And that's the way he answers my prayers, by giving me my self-will. He can't take away my free will. I had a situation, my mom, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my mom just for a few seconds. I went to AA, and it's hard to sober up in a laundromat, and I asked my mother if I could stay at her house when I came in AA and get sober. And she said I could, but I had to live by her rules, of course, and that was, I was 29 at this time. I had to come in the house, and I had to be in at 12 o'clock and all this other stuff. And so I said, okay. My mom, 2 years before that, this was in 1973, my mom had contracted breast cancer, and they gave her 6 months to live after removing her breast and removing part of her back and all this other stuff. They gave her 6 months to live, and in December 27th in 1975, I came home from my second AA meeting, and she was sitting up drunk, and she said, I need help too. I got angry at that. And she joined Alcoholics Anonymous, December 27th, 1975. All of the kids that were raised in my family, out of 6 children, 4 of them were alcoholics. One of them weighs about 300 pounds, God love her. And the other one goes to Al-Anon. All of them, except for my obese sister, are in recovery. I have a brother who's got 3 years of sobriety, a sister with 2, another sister with 2. We've all had a chance to work through the program with my mother, who died a year and a half ago, 12 years after they gave her 6 months to live. She was sober 10 years. Miracle. Took me 7 years to like her. 7 years to like her. One of the miracles of the program. I never had anybody, the problem with hating someone that you love is it makes you very confused. Did you say that? And I didn't know how I was going to handle her dying of cancer, The cancer was always there, but it was kept in a state of remission for about 11 years while we all worked through all of these things. And while she had a chance to see almost all of us get into recovery. And when she was dying, I didn't know how I was going to handle that, And I had been trying to practice the steps of the program. And the 11th step was the one that I hungered for the most, because it was the one that I wanted a closer relationship with God. It talked about meditation and seeking His will, and I didn't know how to do that. But I wanted it bad. I wanted to be close to God. And when my mom was dying, I like to go down by the water and meditate in the morning. And living in Virginia Beach, I do that a lot, and that's why I think I like this place so much. There's a lake near where I work. When I can't go to the ocean, I go by this lake. And I was sitting there one day, and I see my mom was now down to about 60 pounds, and she was dying. Her illness was active again, and she was going quick. And I was staying away from it. I didn't know how I could handle it. See, I didn't know all it. I was afraid that I would lose my mind and go up on a tower and start shooting people or something. I'm a neurotic man. I said, how am I going to handle somebody I love dying, especially when I hate them? I didn't know. I'm a neurotic person. What the hell? So I didn't know what to do, and I was seeking help for this, And as I was sitting down by this lake, I had my eyes shut, And I was trying to make contact, and I was trying to ask God to help me deal with this thing, and all of a sudden, when my eyes were closed, I saw an image in my mind, if you will, or in true reality. And it was an image of my higher power, who I call Jesus Christ. And he had his arm around me, and he was walking with me on this shoreline. And he said, you know, if you call on me in the most futile hour, he said, I'll be there. And I could feel his arm on my shoulder. It was a spiritual experience. I never had anything like that before or since. And it was so firm that I opened my eyes and looked to see if there was somebody there, because I knew that there was, and yet when I opened my eyes, there was no physical appearance. And I knew at that moment what I had to do. And I went back to my mom's house, and my dad, she was dying at home, and my dad was taking care of her best he could, and of course she was in a chair just waiting to pass on, or to make her transition, if you will. And I went in and I said, let me ask you about this dying stuff. How do you feel about this? Let's talk about this stuff here. I said, what's the deal? And she looked at me and she smiled, and she reached out. She was weak and she squeezed my hand. And she knew that I had accepted what she had already accepted. And I kissed her, and I think it was at that moment, it was at that moment that I really, really loved her, and I really, really liked her at the same time. And that was a gift, freedom. She died one morning, not long after that, and it was a beautiful transition. It was nothing morbid. Alcoholics Anonymous, the Fellowship of Al-Anon combined. My dad was very active in Al-Anon at that time. Made it possible. You don't need this wailing and gnashing of teeth when someone's dying of cancer. It's all how you look at it. And once we started looking at it right, it was a beautiful transition. And she died with dignity. And that was beautiful. My green-eyed angel Diane came into my life when I was sober about 6 months. You can imagine what kind of a banana I was, still 6 months sober. She taught me respect for women. She helped me walk through all of the secrets, the sexual secrets. What a miracle that was. God's been very, very good to us. We've got 2 AA children. We have 2 young sons who were born since we've been married for now 7 years. And they're beautiful. My 2 children from my first marriage, I have a good relationship with. One of them is very active in adult children of alcoholics meetings. And she's starting to turn around. I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that somebody asked me to come out here and talk to you people, because you look beautiful. If you could see you now, you'd say so. I don't know what else I got to say except that in the words of this wise old plumber, if no one's told you they love you today, I love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gene. Oh, no. Now it's going to cut out on me. Hello? Oh. Sure. We're almost done now.
It's going to have to be done anyway.
We got it all together. Thank you so much, Gene. I had this tremendous feeling that I had last year that I'm just so grateful to be a member of this program and for the opportunity to do whatever I want to do today. And you've made me realize that again. I thank you. Committee wants to thank you for coming, and this is a little token of our esteem. We have a nice way of closing. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works. You've even gotten better since last year. I like people who